all know that from time to time wrestling is going to be silly, because when you break it right down, wrestling is a little bit silly. It's like any sport. Soccer, for example. 22 people are going to try and kick a ball into a net. Biggest sport in the world. So there's been plenty of times when those at the top of the WWE tree have worked themselves into ridiculous positions, and even though it's fun for the story, the logic is flawed. And yes, so I'm Simon from What Culture. Please do hit that subscribe button. And this is the 10 dumbest decisions by WWE champions. Number 10, Bray Wyatt and his Randy Orton revenge plan. We all remember this. When Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton were feuding for the first time, the Viper listened to the voices in his head and burned down Wyatt's shed. That doesn't sound too bad, but as we were told that this was everything to Bray, and that after it had been set aflame, his life was essentially done, well, that wasn't so great. So when we got to WrestleMania with the WWE title on the line, Wyatt's big plan at Revenge was to project weird images onto the ring canvas as if he had gone out and got a cursed overhead projector. What made no sense though was that to show the fans what was going on, WWE had to utilize a bird's eye camera shot, so how the hell was Orton going to know what the deal was? The images too were just strange, as we saw a bunch of bugs, and this was the equivalent of trying to get one over a partner who cheated on you by cheating on yourself. And I don't even know what that means. It got worse because it took Randy 13 seconds after one of these happened before he RKO'd Wyatt for the win, meaning this plan didn't work at all. Plus the whole thing only went 10 minutes. Was not ideal. Number 9, YOKOZUNA willingly offers Hulk Hogan a title match at WrestleMania 9. I still don't know why we did this, which is the general consensus too, but when you forget about the real life happenings and dive into the narrative, it is still stupid. I mean, who in their right mind would agree to have a championship match seconds after just having a championship match? That's not being arrogant, it's being an idiot. But hey, before Mr. Fuji could say a word, Hulk Hogan did march to the ring, say he was here to defend Bret Hart's honor, and Yoko agreed to take him on. A blink of an eye later and we had a new champion. Sheesh. The idea was to rehab Hulkamania, and that lasted all of 2 months before WWE realized it was done, but the mess we'd made along the way. Yokozuna could have just gone, nah bro, and walked off. Nobody would have thought anything less of him. Number 8, Kane gives Stone Cold a rematch. I mean, Kane at this point was still being sold as a guy who was burned alive as a child, so I suppose you could say that would result in some poor decision making. You're not gonna be right after that. But following his world title win at the King of the Ring 1998, where he did indeed make Steve Austin draw first blood, the Big Red Machine saw no issue in granting the Rattlesnake his rematch 24 hours later on Raw. He didn't even wait till the next pay-per-view. Designed to pop a rating, as they say, it did work, and as a kid, I thought this was the coolest thing ever, but no other new champion had to do this, so Kane could have just turned this down and had a good month with the gold over his shoulder. Still though, back in the late 90s, it was all about Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Kane was such a cool character it didn't hurt him, but come on now, don't be so dumb. Number 7, Andre the Giant sells the title to Ted DiBiase. Andre the Giant had a money deal with Ted DiBiase, so when he defeated Hulk Hogan for the WWF title in what was at the time one of the most watched matches in history, he instantly gave the championship to the $1 Million Man. Talk about corruption. The reason it made Andre look so daft is because he was more focused on his dumb deal he'd made with Ted as opposed to his actual contract. As soon as this had happened, President Jack Tunney arrived and said that this was not considered a legal change and therefore the title was now held up. And yes, this made DiBiase a moron too. It all led to a tournament at WrestleMania 4, and did Ted win? No. Did the Giant win? No. So this was a massive mistake. It was the Macho Man Randy Savage who came out on top, and he did this without having to be shady in the shadows. The worst part as well is that DiBiase would never get his hands on the belt again, and it wasn't even considered a proper reign. So technically, he never won it. That is not right. Number 6, Bob Backlund does a Yokozuna. Bob Backlund in 1994 is kind of incredible. Despite at one point being all that was good and proper in wrestling, here he was proper nuts and bordering on psychotic. Backlund was also mad because he decided he never lost the title back in 1983, and he used all of this to become champions once more when he defeated Bret Hart at the Survivor Series. Trust me, it was just as shocking back then. Even then though, his experience didn't help him when it came to a house show 3 days after the pay-per-view. Despite Yokozuna acting in a similar fashion a year prior, when Diesel confronted Bob and demanded a title match, Backlund said that sounded like a great idea. I'm not sure what he was expecting. Behind the scenes, the veteran was about to finish up his deal, hence why this happened, and yes, seconds later Backlund was powerbombed, and he had lost his gold once more. We all know what occurred after that, but if you've never seen this footage, hunt it down. It certainly caused quite the splash almost 30 years ago. Number 5, Ric Flair and Miss Elizabeth. We sometimes forget how important Miss Elizabeth was to both storylines and the WWE Championship because she rarely got physically involved. If she was around right now, she would have absolutely been booked in at least one match, and yet back in the day, events kind of just happened around her. So we do jump to 1992, and just as the Macho Man and Elizabeth were getting over Jake Roberts trying to kill them with a snake, in walked Ric Flair. Given that the Nature Boy was going to tangle with Randy Savage over the title at WrestleMania, he thought he'd have some fun, if by fun you mean trying to ruin somebody's relationship. Starting a story that Elizabeth was his before she was Randy's, he also insinuated that untoward events had been happening behind the scenes. All this did was piss Savage off. Because not only did the Macho Man beat Flair for his belt, but he absolutely murdered him during the match too, fueled forward by these lies and accusations. So none of this worked out for Rick, especially as it was all outed as poppycock and he had to tuck his tail between his legs after taking a hiding. I don't think this was his plan. Number 4, Randy Savage turns on Hulk Hogan. The Mega Powers imploding in 1989 was pure money, especially as Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage had been hanging out since late 1987. That's the definition of a long-term feud, and seeing the Macho Man get consumed with rage before violently beating up the Hulkster had everybody hooked. There was so much to this too. After Savage won the championship at WrestleMania 4 with a little help from Hulk Hogan, he glared at his buddy during an innocent exchange with Miss Elizabeth. Over the next 11 months, this just got worse and worse. Even though he was the cream of the crop, Randy was not enjoying his time at all. Paranoia had set up shop in his brain and nobody could convince him otherwise. Hulk was moseying in on his girl and he wasn't gonna stand for it. It blew up when Savage brutally attacked Hogan on an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, and it meant eventually he lost his title. Whoops. Goes to show, people, lead your life with good in your heart. Don't be ruined by the dark side. Number 3, Bret Hart keeps his match against Psycho Sid. Bret Hart was anything but a dumb wrestler. In fact, he may have been one of the smartest, all things considered, but this is why his feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin was so good. It affected the Hitman so much, he lost his damn mind. So when the Rattlesnake jumped Bret and beat him up before his title defense against Psycho Sid on the February 17, 1997 Raw, the match had to be moved to later in the evening. When we got to that point, Austin did the same thing again, and anyone who was thinking straight would have agreed that we just call the whole thing off and go home. Not Bret. Stubborn to the end, he marched to the ring in a weakened state, and we all knew what was gonna happen. Stone Cold struck again, this time with a steel chair, smashed it into Hart's face, and he lost his championship to Sid, even though he did not need to do this. Obviously, storyline-wise, it was great and would peak at WrestleMania 13, but Bret really should have seen this coming. He did not. Number 2, Edge forgets what he did. When Edge lost his World Heavyweight title to CM Punk in 2008, there was a real sense of poetry to it. The Rated R superstar had just been eaten alive by Batista, meaning he was easy pickings, which Punk realized given he was the current Money in the Bank holder. When he saw that Edge wasn't moving much, CM arrived on the scene, gave the champ the go-to-sleep to not only become the champion himself, but also keep the success rate of cash-ins at 100%. That thing was becoming more important than winning the Royal Rumble. Seriously though, of all the people, the ultimate opportunist should have been more careful in these situations because he literally got that nickname by abusing the Money in the Bank stipulation. In many ways, you could say it's what made him famous. It did make this entire situation really cool though, as it was the definition of what goes around comes around. And as I'm saying these words, The Miz has done it recently again. Just a shame with that one, we had to go round the bend twice. Number 1, RVD gets pulled over by the cops. To end all this, we move away from the world of the predetermined right into reality, and man was it poor timing. In mid-2006, Rob Van Dam, the current people's hero, was a double WWE champion. No one thought this was possible at one stage given how he was often treated by the company, and yet here we were, it was great. Coming off the back of the One Night Stand pay-per-view, which also kinda relaunched ECW, Van Dam took this a step higher too because he had defeated John Cena for this honor. It was like everybody's dreams were coming true. This was great for a month as well, and then bam, brick wall. RVD along with Sabu were pulled over by the police as they traveled from town to town, and as it turned out, they had a bunch of drugs in their vehicle. They were charged for this, and of course WWE had no choice but to take the belt off Van Dam, and he was served with a 30-day suspension. And as you already know, he never got anywhere near these ever again. Know of any more dumb decisions by WWE champions? Make sure you let us know in the comments below, and then don't forget to like the video, share the video, and please do subscribe. You can also read more stuff like this over on WhatCulture.com. You can watch more of it right now by clicking another video, and why not say hello to us on social media. My name is Simon Miller, this was What Culture Wrestling, and you make sure you take care of yourself, and always look both ways before crossing the street.